Hello again, everyone. This is Abra, and I'm back to give my 2 cents on the graphic novel Do You See What I See by Nick Brewster. Do You See What I See is a 176-page satirical slasher story in the sense that it doesn't take itself too seriously. Kind of think of the 90s movies Scream. It touched on familiar tropes that occur in almost all of the horror flicks, and it kind of makes fun of them, and yet they still occur within the story. Do You See What I See is a unique take on the slasher because it touches on the woke culture today that has become, unfortunately, prevalent among the young people today and on college campuses. It also addresses the idea of authoritarianism and freedom of speech. The story takes place in present day at a university, and the campus is divided because there is an outspoken guest that's been invited to speak. He's a provocateur. Think of maybe a Milo Yiannopoulos kind of character who says things that is going to pretty much incite every side. But of course, with this current generation where people think that words are literally violence, this has some of the students up in arms because they are from a more coddled generation. The story kind of starts out pretty quickly. It briefly introduces you to the key players. It's Halloween, and they happen to be celebrating with a pretty cool party outside the campus. And, everyone's having a good time. There is a brother and sister. Remington is the brother, and his twin sister Reagan. The sister is kind of flirting it up with a guy, and come to find out the guy that she's having a little fling with happens to be one of the teachers or tutors on campus, and his parents are in charge of the college. The dean and dean's wife, who's also I think a gender studies teacher, which kind of seems appropriate. Unfortunately, a tragic event happens. Everyone's partying, and then all of a sudden, splat! Poor Reagan appears to have offed herself because the parents of her lover were not happy about the relationship. So then the story, right after this, flashes forward 1 year, and it focuses on a girl named Liz. She's an Australian. She's come to the States to attend this university. We get to know the characters a little bit better. This story has kind of the familiar archetypes, but it's still diverse. You have kind of like your suave guy in Remington, or Remy, as he likes to be called. Ladies like him. He's smart, but he's, it's only been a year since his sister died, so he's still trying to grapple with that. Liz, the student from Australia, she tries to be friends with everybody, the popular kids, and then also the kind of rabble-rouser group that would be considered the snowflakes on campus, the woke crowd on campus. But she just tries to be kind to all of them. And then you have the kind of jock guy he's a good athlete, he looks good, he's kind of an alpha male. He's friends with Remy. He can be a little bit outspoken, bordering jerk. He's the one that ended up inviting the speaker that has the woke crowd all up in arms. And he just wants to make sure that freedom of speech is still going to be allowed on campus. And the cool thing that I liked about this guy is his name is Chad, which I thought was pretty fitting, being kind of like the alpha male cocky type. He has some great lines, and there's some great lines throughout the book that kind of pick at woke culture, which I thought was really funny. So as we're getting to know all the students and kind of learning their motivations and backgrounds and everything, there's kind of this slow burn before the murdering chaos ensues. People are picked off until the main bloodbath, and I felt that was kind of satisfying. While I was reading this story, I was kind of reminded of watching Columbo. It keeps you guessing as to who the murderer is all the way up to the very end, and I would try to look for clues every time the murderer would make an appearance. It does a pretty good job, the book. It's a good size, so it does a pretty good job of progressing naturally. The story also contains some of the classic horror tropes in the sense that the murderer, the villain, he always catches up with the victim, no matter how much of a head start the victim has. After a while, you're just like, come on. And then the story also does kind of little twists and turns and throws in a fake out about who the killer could be. And one of the things that I was doing when I went back to read the story a second time, I tried to look at facial expressions and what people said to see if there were more clues that I just missed the first read through. The story has a satisfying conclusion, but it is also to be continued. This story is definitely a mature story. The depictions of gore and violence, they felt like they were right out of a slasher flick, eyes popping out, skin coming off bone. So I think they were drawn very well and were very realistic and freaky looking. And there were also some satisfying kills in the book. I know that sounds horrible, but in terms of the creative aspect and the choice of victims, a lot of the people that get hacked up, you're not going to really shed a tear for, I'm sorry to say. Another thing that I liked about this book is that the main character that we follow, Liz, when all of these murders start happening and it's just becoming very overwhelming to her and she really has to kind of stand her ground and hold her own, she's able to do that, but it doesn't come across as Mary Sue. It really feels like she's drawing on her own survival instincts and her rage at all these deaths that are happening around her in order to defend herself and fight for her life. I was kind of thinking of a Ripley from Aliens, just a regular chick, but because of unusual circumstances, she has to, rise to the occasion in order to survive. All in all, I'd say this was a good book. I really liked the story. I went back to read through it a couple times. When I was reading it, I felt like I was watching a movie more so than reading a graphic novel. The characters, their interactions seem very natural. The dialogue feels natural. And like I said, it just felt more like a movie as opposed to your typical run-of-the-mill comic or graphic novel. That's my 2 cents on Do You See What I See? Until next time, take care.